Intentional event design is really just that things need to be people-centric and purpose-driven. So you need to know why you're doing something, and you need to know who you're doing it for, and then you need to bring those things together and then design in a way that is going to help you achieve whatever your objectives are. That success doesn't happen by accident.
Welcome to No More Bad Events, a fun and insightful podcast for professional event organizers and for anyone at any level interested in producing nothing but the best events. Each week, we'll talk with legendary event professionals to get an inside look into what they think makes a great event. And in the process, we'll draw out insider secrets, non-traditional approaches, and compelling stories from the most captivating personalities in the business. No More Bad Events is produced and presented by eSpeakers, the most trusted online platform for the best keynote speakers in the world. And I'm your host, Scott Bloom, comedian, event MC, and now your podcast host. Let's get started. Hey folks, thanks so much for dropping by. We know there are many podcasts out there, so we're always appreciative when you choose ours. Well, you're not going to be disappointed. Today on the program, I have with me an extraordinary guest, someone I've been trying to get on the show for a while. I'm talking about an industry insider who's recently named one of Event Tech's top 100 most influential people in the events industry. That's right, she's here, the one and only Tahira Endean. For those of you who don't know her, Tahira is a seasoned event planner, current head of programming for IMEX, and one of the most respected thought leaders in the industry. But for all her experience and extraordinary credentials, she's a super nice person that's so eager to share the latest and greatest in the events industry, including, and this is ironic or coincidental, given the name of the podcast, but we talked about why events fail. And in fact, there's an event collective out there studying why that happens. And based on their learnings, they're developing and employing methodologies like empathy mapping and prototyping design to help mitigate epic fails. I'm telling you, it's fascinating stuff, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Tahira also does a deep dive into the pivotal role IMEX plays in the events industry. She shares how innovative approaches like intentional event design, AI integration, and diverse educational experiences are reshaping the landscape of both IMEX and events worldwide. With IMEX America coming up in October, there's a lot to look forward to. Networking, learning opportunities, and some eye-opening tough talks featuring hospitality workers and veterans. Whether you're a seasoned pro or new to the game, there's something for everyone. So let's get to it. Here's my conversation with the visionary and insightful Tahira Endean. You just came back from Frankfurt, IMEX Frankfurt 2024. Before we get into that, and I want to hear all about it, share with me, how did you get where you are right now in the events world?
Oh my God, it's such a long story. I have been working in events for a long time, and I'm one of the very unusual people who came into events by education first. So I started off with an event and convention management diploma, which almost nobody does. And so I've been a meeting planner, so working at a PCO, professional conference organizer. I have been a DMC, creative director, an event producer at an incentive agency, worked a little blip at an event technology company, sort of forced me to learn a lot about technology at a time that was really shifting, which was helpful. And then I planned a conference for our government for 3 years. So then I got to learn more about technology, but things like splitting atoms and stuff, which was super cool. And then I took some time off and went traveling for a while, and then came back from that as the head of events for Site, which I did for a few years through the pandemic. So that was super fun. And eventually IMEX said, oh, we can have remote employees. So I'm one of 2 remote employees for IMEX.
Yeah, we had Karina Bauer on the show almost a couple of years ago. I think it was before one of the IMEX, maybe it was Las Vegas. You have had many different roles, but you seem to keep on gravitating towards education. And as I mentioned, you just came back from IMEX Frankfurt. How did you decide, what topics to cover, and how do you make sure they're always relevant to the attendees?
It's actually a really great question. I spend all year building the program. So with the team, we basically just keep a mural board that goes on a rolling basis so that every time that we are looking, we're just listening all of the time. So people come back if they see somebody who's really great or a topic that's really interesting, so basically up until, sort of like for the show that we just did in May, by November, we had a good sense of where we wanted to go with it and just start really drafting and drilling down into the things and just work with the team really closely to make sure that what we're thinking about doing is really on trend. And one of the things I feel really lucky about with IMEX is that, before I started, for me, it was always a place where you could see the kind of it was the mothership, right? The new place that things were happening. And when they asked me to be the head of program and to take that even farther, what a lucky person am I to be able to do that? So this year we're always just trying sort of, testing or prototyping one or two new things. We also know some things are not going to work. So, there's always the things we have to try because we have to be the ones to try them. If we can't be brave enough to try them, then who will be really? So this year, we did two things that were kind of fun for Frankfurt. One was called Wonder Walks, where Robert Dunsmore, who's a pretty amazing creative designer, took people on walks through the trade show floor, but looking for how biophilia, so the use of nature in trade show booths, was executed and when it was and wasn't effective and why it might not be. And, really based on a lot of research that he has done, so if you are in an office where you have access to nature, you're actually 68% more productive. So why wouldn't that apply to the environments that we're creating within events? So he has lots of good things to share while people went through and looked at it from that perspective. So that was just kind of an interesting little thing that we tried. And then we had tough talks. And last year we did conversations on the menopause, they call it in Europe. So I know it's like very important it gets that in front of it. And we did it on the trade show floor as one of the campfires. And it was very popular and very well received, but people just felt a bit too exposed. So we said, okay, let's move conversations like that off of the trade show floor. And so then we added two more to that. So we added social anxiety. And so we had a really great woman named Melba who took on social anxiety in our teams at work and at our events and different strategies we might have for dealing with those as leaders and event designers. And then we had two amazing men who came to speak with us. So Darren Edwards is a disabled adventurer, and he spoke a few different times with different topics. And Rob Hosking, who started an organization called The Rise of Happiness. Both, when I got to know them a little bit more, I knew that they both had stories where they had been touched in different ways by suicide. And so they actually did a tough talk called Men, Mental Health, and Suicide, where people came in to, a closed room under Chatham House rules and were able to just really open up about what they might be feeling. So for things like that, any of those kinds of sessions, my feeling is if 5 people come and get something out of it, perfect. Those are 5 people that needed to do that. And I can tell you that there was a lot more than 5. So what we really try to do is to take those really tough personal topics that sometimes you don't have a place for, or you don't have an outlet for when you're just in your regular day-to-day life, and then balance them with the deeply professional topics, all of the sustainability and leadership and inclusion and all of the things that we would expect to find at a show. And then because it's such a big show and so many people come from so many places, we also have the opportunity to create these amazing collisions of people. So we created quite a few sessions this year that weren't people that they didn't even know each other until I introduced them, but people whose stories I knew, and I knew that there would be synergy. And so we were able to take, instead of just one person standing up and talking, to create just richer conversations that invited more conversations and also created some lifelong friendships, I think, actually out of those. And I think that for me is also the fun. So, definitely my superpower is that I connect people. And we just saw it just come up just like in bing, 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 bing all over this show. And that was really fun. So I just think that it's just a really unique and special place. And to be able to have influence in that way it's really special. And we don't take it for granted.
The human connection that you were, creating by bringing people together and then having them have a dialogue that will impact others, or even the walking tour. I think when I spoke to Karina a while back, they were talking about I didn't hear the term biophilia, but she was talking about bringing in the outdoors inside. Were there any other trends that were happening that you saw people bring to the meeting that you learned from?
AI. I mean, if it had AI in the title, it was like bursting out of the room every time, so every session in a whole bunch of different ways. We talked about, we introduced using Snapsight, which is the Spark product. So we were able to, at the end of every session, almost immediately, key takeaways came out from 5 of our theaters from all of the sessions that we did. So that was really fun to use AI in that way, and to, it's good. It comes up with really great summaries much faster than us humans could. So some editing needed, but not a lot, and a nice takeaway for people. And right up to, so we had one of the co-founders of Spark we have a campfire area. And so at the campfires, he was doing Spark at the campfire, but just really super deep hands-on, like dig into it a little bit, not so much presentation from the stage. So we got to see all kinds of different ways that people are using AI. And we're still talking about sustainability, which is stunning to me, but here we are still talking about it 30 years later. So,
How does sustainability look different now, 30 years later?
It's more about measurement now. Mm-hmm. So, we're still doing it sometimes really well and sometimes not so well, but we just have some really hard realities coming up with, and a lot of companies now have set 2030 and 2050 targets. So being able to actually find ways that you are going to be able to meet some of those with events, which are by their nature have potential for travel waste, some of the, those big challenges. So we're still talking about it. We're still, sometimes we're getting better at it. It depends a lot on the destination that you're going to and the infrastructure that's in those destinations and the length of travel and a lot of factors that go into it. But the reality is, as event planners, we are really just one part of an omni-channel marketing strategy. And if the organizations that we're working for have a 2030 or your 2050 strategy, then we need to be understanding what we need to do to be part of that story, and in really actionable ways. So a lot of things around that. The costs are rising above budget. That is still real. Definitely things on mental health are still real. Reskilling and upskilling, those are two of the things that we'll see more of those, I think, even in America, as we're seeing our industry change, our industry get younger. Us, the old guard, we might have all the greatest ideas in the world, but now we're, having people who've been in the industry for less than 2 years to execute them. So there's, some just a fundamental shift that needs to happen, and a lot of upskilling that needs to happen with a generation that has come into a post-COVID event world. So that's going to happen.
That transition of bringing the new folks in, just getting them up to speed, or the old guard realizing, hey, there's some new ways to do things?
Both of those things. Mm-hmm. So there's absolutely new ways to do things. Anyone who's scared of AI needs to be not scared of it, because it's just, I look at it really like it's the washing machine. There's no possible way I'm going to go out and still beat my clothes against rocks to wash them. So, why would I start writing something from scratch when I can get a boost from, something that takes 6 seconds that would take me 6 hours to do?
It's incredible. Yeah. I mean, I was just speaking to JT Long, and I think you were on a panel with her, weren't you recently?
I was on the panel with JT and Nick Borelli, who,
Yeah, Nick Borelli, right.
knows a ton about AI. So, yes.
I know Nick talks a lot about prompt engineering. So that's going to be a lot of the interesting thing about the new people coming in. That's all they know now. They're starting from that standpoint. So do you think the teaching might go back and forth in a way? Obviously, you have years of experience, but they came in looking from a different lens. So that's going to be interesting.
I think for sure the teaching goes back and forth. I just look at our daughter is doing she's doing a master's in public health, but she's also doing some event work. And, I was sitting with her one day, we were on vacation, and she had to just finish a couple of things, as we all do, because we're in events and we're on vacation. But I was like, well, just, let's just do it together, because, I was cross-checking a bunch of things. I said, it's easier to do with 2 people. And my God, if I was as fast as she was, it's the stuff that she had to do to, because it was basically at the point where everything was going up onto a website and all the final changes, the conference is starting in 2 days, making sure everything's right between the web and the app and all of that. But honestly, she was just so much faster at it. And I was like, oh man, that'd be so great if I was that fast at it. Part of the reason I'm not that fast at it is because I have people to do it who are fast at it. So I've never had to there's lots of things I haven't had to learn or let alone be good at. But then there's people who don't have any interest at all in doing my job, which is, building out an entire event from soup to nuts and entire flows and, 27, we did over 200 sessions at IMEX Frankfurt. And most people don't have, they're just like, no, don't want to do that. Whereas I love the complexity of figuring out what are all the ways that we can weave things together, and, who are the people that we can bring together to have those different conversations. And, we had, two speakers. I, mentioned Darren Edwards, our disabled adventurer, and we had another guy come, Richard Crawford, who has a TV show called Leave No Trace. So he went from doing, a lot of work in luxury travel and events, and was like, maybe we could be doing this better. So now he's looking really at, sustainable luxury travel. So we created a session that was wildly inclusive travel in a net zero world. It had this amazing woman, Bumi, who's from South Africa, moderating this conversation. But it just went off in just, the synergy of the way that they're all thinking about, from 3 different countries, about how we need to look at creating an inclusive, sustainable world, was just phenomenal. But it's like, are you sure you want to put them together? I was like, he could just speak by himself. I'm like, yep, I'm sure actually that I want to put them together, and then, we had a point where this poor woman, Bumi, I mean, she is, she's got a PhD, she's traveled to 50 countries, and took her 3 tries to get a visa to come to the event. And like, thank God she was so persistent, because I was like, I don't know who's going to moderate this conversation if she doesn't show up. But I mean, it was just, it's bananas, but that's also part of an inclusive world that we live in of, you have somebody who is clearly not a threat. She, her 8-month-old and 2-year-old are staying in South Africa while she goes to speak at a conference. And, but it was just very challenging. And so we have so many, sort of, no matter how far ahead we move in the world of meetings and events, we run into these weird stumbling blocks that we, sometimes get in our own way, or our governments get in our own way to do things. So we're never going to run out of things to talk about, basically.
What I'm thinking is, at least for the North American folks, US and Canada and Mexico even, who are coming over to Frankfurt, the Frankfurt IMEX, it's a pretty big commitment. You're traveling abroad, you're going to be there for a long time. And I would think that they would take the education probably a little bit more seriously, that it's not just a little boondoggle networking thing. What is the demographics difference between Frankfurt and the Americas one?
I'm going to say it's 80-20, in that we have about 20% of the people attend both shows, and then 80% are different at both shows. So a lot of the same companies might be exhibiting, but, if you're a hotel or a destination, you'll have your regional sellers or your national or global sellers at the different shows. And then from the planners, obviously Frankfurt just has a lot more European planners, and America has a lot more North American and Canadian planners. That's the other thing we also have to think about, is that there are very fundamental cultural differences between America and Europe and the rest of the world, in how we learn, in how we're comfortable learning, in the things that we're interested in. There's definitely some similarities, but of course there's differences. And so, we really work at having a lot more European speakers now in Frankfurt, whereas before seemed to be, even though IMEX is a UK-based company, we've really are really working hard to balance that education. We had more German language education in Frankfurt this year with our partner Tanya and the Mice Impact Academy than we've had in years. And it was so successful. I mean, again, it was just like, there was always people just like heaving out of that space into the aisles, which was great. It's nice to have that kind of interest. And it was, of course, it's very satisfying when people are just like, oh my God, and here, I've just found another session I want to go to. I just found another session I want to go to. So, not to take away at all from the meetings. So I think there was more than 53,000 one-to-one meetings this year at Frankfurt IMEX.
Wow. How big was IMEX Frankfurt? How many people attend?
It was north of 14,000. I haven't seen the final numbers yet, but
right.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
So they have to go to their meetings, but, the meetings that the hosted buyers are obligated to, it's such an efficient way of doing business. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do those meetings. Like, you can go and find out more about destinations that you're not going to be able to necessarily fly to or go on a FAM to, or, even sight sometimes until you have more information, or you can see people that you're doing business with and really nurture those relationships. So the meetings are really important, but also going back to that, taking care of ourselves. Anybody who's a CMP or a CSEP or working on their ICA skills designation, we have most of the majority of the education is aligned with at least one of those. So I think we had 58 hours of certified education, something like that. So, if somebody's looking for their continuing education, it's all there. It's about really just finding what that balance is and just getting out there and doing both. My dream is one day that, going to an education session will count as one meeting, but we're not there yet.
Right. And what about, you mentioned that, and I thought that was kind of interesting, that yes, European culture is different than culture in North America a lot of times, and therefore learning styles are different. What about just the meeting planners themselves? Did you get a sense, did you speak to enough European event planners and professionals that you saw maybe a different way they're doing things and something that you may take back to Canada and the States?
I think a lot of the people that we are talking to are planning globally, so that really is, the heads of the global team leads. So they're pretty savvy across the board. And honestly, wherever we go, so when we did our exclusively corporate and our specialist education on Monday, one of the sessions was, it was like trend spotting ABCs, which was AI, belonging, and costs, because we're facing those challenges around the world. How do we integrate AI? How do we create spaces of belonging? And the reality that your budget might be up 4%, but your costs are up 30%. That's just a practical reality at the moment. So that's something that's being faced everywhere. And I think the ways that we mitigate most of those things are face-to-face meetings. So, it's at the end of the day, it might cost more to bring your people together right now, but if you don't bring people together, it takes much longer to move business forward. So, and that's a very human thing. It's one thing for us to go online and buy something. We're all really comfortable doing that. But when you're buying an experience, you want to know what that experience is going to be. You want to experience it, and you want to know who's providing that. So that's when we come to events like this, that's where we meet the people that are going to be taking care of our people. And that's a fundamental human thing that's not going to go away, right? So it comes down to trust. And that is a global challenge. So I don't think there was anything really specific. I mean, I think there's some things when it comes to, things like experiences, and particularly immersive experiences and sort of theater style and performances. Europe, they started doing it 1,000 years before we did. So they have, both more comfort and more skill. If you watch a Hallmark movie, here we know exactly what to expect. If you watch a Hallmark movie that's from an Eastern European nation, it's not always a happy ending, right? So there's also a lot more realism about accepting life as it is and not fairy tale endings, I think.
Yeah, I've interviewed a couple of European speakers, and that's how I describe it. It's just a lot more theatrical, a lot more immersive, a lot more emotional. They're really trying to grab people and take them into their experience. And there's one thing to storytell and just sort of present, but storytell to bring people in. Yeah. You talked about that walking tour, which I thought was great. Will that be something now that you'll bring to IMEX America? How does that cycle work? Is it America and then Frankfurt, or is it Frankfurt and then America in terms of your design? Or is it constantly evolving?
Yeah. It is constantly evolving. There's always sort of two murals open, right? Like, what are we doing now? What are we doing next? We won't have specifically Wonder Walks, but we will have a walking tour that's of a slightly different sort. We'll keep the tough talks, but we'll have different people presenting them. We have a really great woman, Dina Mitchell-Brown, who, when the pandemic started, she had to close her DMC. And when that happened, she went back to a time of trying to commit suicide when 23 years before. And this is on her website. I'm not telling anything out of school. Mm-hmm. And so she, from that, started the Realize Foundation. And she's now on their 4th book of Scars to Stars, which is people telling hospitality workers and veterans telling their stories. And it could be something where they had their own attempt, or they lost a family member, or everybody has their own story. And so Dina will be doing some of that work with us in America. So we won't go away from the tough talks, We'll have a lot of experience design, a lot of leadership, a lot of really interesting leaders that will be sharing their stories. Actually, that's going to be a huge focus for America this year because there's so many lessons to be learned and so many ways that people can be mentored individually, but also, from a stage where you're just learning from people who have been through a lot. We have a fun format that's called Event Profs Unplugged, which is so Kate, who you interviewed, so Kate and Zenna have just hosted their second Event Profs Unplugged now in Frankfurt, and we'll bring it back. So this year was Event Profs Unplugged, the Taylor Swift edition. So we had a couple of great speakers from London and Paris talking about mega events, including Taylor. But, what happens when your city's hosting a mega event, like the High Roxes that we're seeing and Olympics coming and all those kinds of things. There was, I said the job I had before this was the head of events for SITE, and SITE has a great program called Young Leaders. And about 15 years ago, there's a group of young leaders that met putting on a Young Leaders Conference. And that time they were all, pretty fresh in their careers. And now they're all managing directors and owners and very senior in their organizations, SVPs of this and that. And a year ago in New York at the SITE Global Conference, they all met up as they always do. And they're just at a time in their life when they were like, we could do something. And so this January, they summited Kilimanjaro. And then 5 of them came and told the story of that experience and the things that they learned about hospitality and leadership and friendship and growth and vulnerability. And when I saw that they had done that, I'm like, are you speaking about that like in the conference that's coming up? They're like, nope. I'm like, great. Then you're speaking about it in Frankfurt because hello, that's amazing. So we'll probably bring a different group because there is 5 of them in Frankfurt. There'll probably be a different selection of 5 of them in America. So such a great story. So of course we'd have them back. So, Event Design Collective is now doing a lot of work around why events fail. So, at one point we had, talking about why events fail, but it was with the Event Design Collective and, the CEOs of SITE, IAEE, and Jesse from MPI talking about why events fail and what we as an industry need to be doing better to model how not to have events that objectively fail. So, and don't meet their desired outcomes. So
that sentence is such a horrible sentence to hear. I mean, the name of this podcast is No More Bad Events, and we're trying to help people so that they don't fail. Did they give some example? What does a failing event look like? Is it clear when an event just fails? Is it permeates the entire conference for days, or is it just a one moment that failed?
It can be all of those things, but I mean, it's basically, we invest a lot of time and a lot of money in doing events, but I think we can all agree that there are a lot of events in the world that are done without knowing why you're doing them, without knowing where to spend your money, listening to stakeholders that, care that my wife likes this restaurant, so that's where we're going to take our group for dinner, even though only half the group fits there. It's all of those, small and large things that can happen. And so over the course of, the decade that they've been working on event design, they started to see that there was this pattern of, that there was things that were failing. And so now they've spent the last year doing a lot of research with hundreds of surveys and talking to people, what are the fail points? Why do events fail? And how can we be doing it better? And I mean, they have a whole methodology around how to design, events from empathy mapping to prototyping design. So they're probably the best position to do it. But to also have, again, these heads of these associations that are saying, yeah, sometimes we're getting it right. And sometimes, we and our constituents are getting it wrong. So how can we all together step up and continue to do better all the time? So,
and you deal with, I know something that's important to you is something called intentional event design. Is that what you're referring to? That everything is sort of well thought out?
Absolutely. I mean, intentional event design, I wrote a book called Intentional Event Design. So it's, something that is very important to me. But it's, intentional event design is really just that things need to be people-centric and purpose-driven. So you need to know why you're doing something and you need to know who you're doing it for. And then you need to bring those things together and then design in a way that is going to help you achieve whatever your objectives are. That success doesn't happen by accident. You need to know your audience and design for them. So when we have, 15,000 people coming to an IMEX, there is no possible way we can make every single person happy. But what we can do is we can find pathways for people to be able to find the things that will make them happy and to leave feeling exhilarated versus exhausted. Like it's a marathon. Let's be, have you been to an IMEX, Scott?
I have not. I have many friends who have. And
Well, then
I've been in the city while it's happening. That's as close as I've gotten.
You're going to probably have to come to IMEX this year.
Well, tell me, let's get that out right now. What are the dates? And I'm sure everyone who's going know the dates. What are the dates this year for IMEX America?
It's October 8th to 10th, and Smart Monday is on October 7th. So,
okay, 8 to 10. Ironically, I just got a call today for an event in Nashville on October 10th, but I can always come a little early.
Close, right? Nashville is so close to, yes.
Yes.
I think that, I had a friend who started working for a desk. So my very first introduction to IMEX was the first year it was here, so 2011, I think. And I built the booth for Vancouver. And first of all, for a city to have a booth was a very unusual thing. And it started that, I sat down at my desk and there was a Post-it note, like, call this guy about a booth at a new show. And I was just like, oh God, here we go. So, but I did. And I just remember walking into that show and we've all been to industry shows. I mean, this is nothing like an industry show. It's the amount of care and attention and detail that goes into every aspect of the show, and every single booth that is part of the show is phenomenal. And if you are working for any destination, any hotel, gifting company, DMC, and you are not on that show floor, are you really in the industry? I mean, it's just, are you really serious about meetings and events and incentives? Because that's where everybody is. And they're there because the buyers are there. In Vegas, we'll have more than 4,000 buyers that we bring specifically to meet with all of these people from around the world. And just the scope and the scale of it, it's mind-boggling. But we also have places for your meetings, places, serendipity. I mean, you're always running into people, interesting activations. Like you don't know what is going to pop up, whether it's a sponsored activation or a booth activation or something that we've dreamed up. They all exist. And there's places for you to sit down and just work, because we know that sometimes you just have to stop and return that email or that call or have that meeting. There's little nooks where you can just go and hide away. There's, and then, on the learning, there's 100 theater seats down to one-to-one coaching. And then we'll have, again, the resilience room where you can just go and lie under a weighted blanket and feel a bit of joy, or meet somebody from, who's working with the Google XI team and go and be part of a collaboratory brainstorming, do a spontaneous think tank with the folks from Club Itchy. You never know what's going to happen. So you'll always be able to find something. There'll be a dance party somewhere and a happy hour somewhere and a quiet breakfast somewhere. So, but at the end of the day, it's all about connection and dialogue. And, it doesn't matter who's posted something on LinkedIn. That's what you just see over and over and over and over and over again, is people connecting.
From what you've been telling me during our conversation, it was a huge success, Frankfurt. I can see you beaming as you talk about it, very proud of what happened there and all the learning and all the education that went on. It sounds like there were some great networking opportunities as well. People got to connect. You found interesting ways to connect different thought leaders together to create a new type of delivery and a new topic that can come out of two people having a conversation as opposed to one person presenting. And then you just said it just a moment ago, if you're in the events industry, you should be at IMEX. Now, you don't have to fly to Frankfurt. There's coming up, in October, IMEX America. So I would encourage anyone who's listening to, I'm sure anyone who's listening in the event world has probably been to IMEX, but definitely go. As you heard from Tahira, it's constantly evolving. There's always new ways of learning, and there's so much new information out there, and you need to be on top of it.
You're right. Everyone should go to IMEX, because it is the place that our industry comes together. And I can pretty much guarantee that they will leave with enough memories that they'll want to come back again. So,
and having those great opportunities to meet, industry thought leaders like yourself. We mentioned Kate Pate and all the people you've mentioned. And I'm looking forward. I'm gonna find a way to get there. I'll find a way.
There's no registration. You can just come.
I'll just pop in. I'll pop in.
You just pop in. There's no cost.
I am due. I will definitely be there. Thanks, Tahira. Thank you so much again for being on the program. Hopefully we'll see each other in person sometime soon.
October 8th, I believe.
Okay, I hope so. All right, bye, Tahira. That's it for now. Thanks once again to eSpeakers, the #1 way to find your next perfect speaker. With the deepest catalog of professionals available, you can be assured that the speaker you book will be the absolute best speaker based on your goals, bar none. I've been your host, Scott Bloom, corporate event MC and comedic keynote speaker. And of course, your connoisseur of connections. Oh, by the way, and if you're interested, you can book me for your next event on eSpeakers Marketplace at espeakers.com/marketplace. And if you like what you heard, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you loved what you heard, drop us a review, and don't forget to share with your friends. Thanks so much for listening. Now go out and make your event a great one.